I had always believed that loyalty was the very foundation of life, that trust was a sacred bond to be nurtured and guarded like the most precious treasure. My name is Michael, and growing up in a small town in Indiana taught me the value of honesty and integrity. Life had been predictable and calm until the day everything changed, until the day betrayal shattered the world I once knew. I remember the golden summers of my youth, the endless afternoons spent riding my bike down dusty roads, the late-night conversations with my best friend Ryan, whose laughter and unwavering support had been constants in my life. Ryan and I had grown up side by side, our bond cemented through shared secrets and dreams. Along with our mutual friend Jake, and even my then-girlfriend Sarah, we had built a world that felt invincible. But as life often proves, the very things we cherish can sometimes be the instruments of our undoing. After college, I moved to a bustling city on the East Coast, full of hope and ambition. I was determined to make my mark, to prove that the values instilled in me would serve as my guiding light in a world that seemed increasingly ruthless. I landed a promising job at a reputable firm, and even though I was miles away from home, I carried the memories of those simpler times close to my heart. I kept in touch with Ryan, Jake, and Sarah, each conversation a gentle reminder of where I came from. We spoke of everything, from trivial daily mishaps to our deepest fears and aspirations. In retrospect, those long, heartfelt chats seemed like the glue that held our lives together. But as I ascended the ladder of success, shadows began to creep into my bright new world. Ryan, always the charismatic and free-spirited one, started behaving in ways I couldn't quite understand. At first, I brushed it off as the natural evolution of a person adapting to new circumstances. However, soon whispers of office politics and murmurs of a secret alliance reached my ears. I was blindsided by a series of cryptic messages that hinted at alliances formed in dark corners of ambition, alliances that implicated none other than the people I trusted most. The first sign came on a cold November evening when I received an anonymous text message. "Not all that glitters is gold, Michael. Some friendships are built on lies." At the time, I thought it was nothing more than a sick joke, a cruel prank aimed at rattling me. Yet, as days turned into weeks, a series of subtle betrayals began to unveil themselves. There were times when Ryan would cancel our plans with no explanation, only to later be seen laughing over drinks with colleagues who weren't even part of our circle. I caught glimpses of secretive meetings between him and Jake, exchanges that carried a weight of unspoken understanding and conspiracy. I tried to dismiss my growing unease, convincing myself that perhaps I was simply overthinking the situation. After all, in a world where every person has their own battles, wasn't it possible that Ryan and Jake were just pursuing new opportunities? But the doubts festered, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. It was during one particularly vulnerable night, after a grueling day filled with back-to-back meetings and relentless pressure, that I found myself scrolling through old emails and text messages, searching for a clue that might explain the shifting dynamics. There, in the midst of countless trivial exchanges, I discovered a conversation that made my heart sink. A thread where Ryan and Jake discussed a business venture that I was never meant to be a part of. A venture that promised lucrative rewards at my expense. The sting of betrayal hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I spent sleepless nights grappling with emotions that ranged from anger to profound sadness. How could someone I considered my brother in arms be so callous? The very idea that those I had trusted, people who had once held my hand through life's darkest moments, could turn their backs on me was almost too much to bear. The betrayal was not just professional. It felt like a personal annihilation, a fracturing of the core of my identity. I began to unravel the layers of deceit, piecing together moments that I had once dismissed as coincidences. Each memory, every shared laugh, every promise whispered in the quiet moments before dawn, now carried the bitter aftertaste of duplicity. Sarah, too, had become entangled in a web of secrets. Our relationship, once built on mutual admiration and love, was now tainted by suspicion and half-truths. Late at night, as I sat alone in my modest apartment overlooking the neon glow of the city, I questioned every word, every gesture. The echo of her voice in my mind would alternate between comforting and accusatory, as though she too were a specter of betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and confrontation. I reached out to Jake, desperately seeking clarity. His responses were evasive, laden with justifications that felt hollow in the wake of undeniable evidence. Ryan, once the pillar of our unbreakable bond, maintained a facade of casual indifference, his eyes betraying nothing when I pressed him for the truth. The more I probed, the more I realized that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a calculated betrayal. A betrayal that had been meticulously orchestrated over months, if not years. I remember sitting in a dimly lit diner one rainy afternoon, the patter of rain against the window matching the rhythm of my racing heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that every raindrop was a tear from a sky that had witnessed my downfall. As I stared into the swirling patterns on the window, my mind replayed the countless memories of a time when trust was unassailable. I recalled the summer afternoons spent at the local baseball field, cheering for our team with unbridled enthusiasm, and the quiet, heartfelt conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Those were the days before ambition had poisoned our friendship, before greed had blurred the lines between loyalty and self-interest. In the midst of my despair, a small voice inside me whispered that perhaps there was a lesson to be learned from this betrayal, a lesson about the fragility of human connections and the necessity of forging one's own path. It was a painful epiphany, one that forced me to confront not only the treachery of others, but also the vulnerabilities within myself. I began to document every detail of my experience, pouring my heart out in a series of journal entries that later became the raw, unfiltered narrative I now share on this forum. I wanted others to know that betrayal isn't an isolated incident. It's a universal wound that many of us carry in silence, a wound that can ultimately lead to growth if we allow it. Yet, as I sat down to write these words, a part of me still clung to the hope that the people I once loved might find their way back from the abyss of their own making. I reached out once more, extending an olive branch to Sarah in a desperate bid to salvage what was left of our once beautiful relationship. Her response, however, was a mix of sorrow and resignation, a quiet admission that sometimes love isn't enough to heal wounds inflicted by betrayal. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness, while noble, is not always the salve for every broken heart. As the nights turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery. I sought solace in art, in long walks along the river that wound through the city, and in the quiet corners of libraries where I lost myself in books that echoed my own turmoil. Slowly, the searing pain of betrayal began to morph into a quiet strength, a resolve to redefine my identity on my own terms. I started volunteering at local community centers, reaching out to others who had faced similar heartaches. In sharing my story, I discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Even now, as I write these lines, the scars of betrayal remain, a constant reminder of a time when trust was shattered and innocence was lost. But they also serve as a beacon of hope, illuminating the path to recovery and self-empowerment. My journey is far from over, and every day brings a new challenge, a new opportunity to rebuild what was once broken. I continue to wonder about Ryan, about Jake, and about the choices that led us all down such divergent paths. In the quiet moments before sleep, I replay the conversations, the laughter, the shared dreams, each one a bittersweet reminder of a past that can never be recaptured. This is not just my story. It is a testament to anyone who has ever been betrayed, who has ever felt the sting of treachery in the midst of what should have been unconditional love. It is a reminder that even in our darkest hours, there is a spark of light waiting to guide us home. And so as I begin this new chapter, I invite you to walk with me, to share in the pain and the triumphs, and to ultimately find solace in the knowledge that even the deepest wounds can give rise to the most unexpected forms of strength. I found myself sinking deeper into an inner labyrinth of memories and regrets that twisted and turned with every thought of what had transpired. In the weeks following that fateful confrontation, life seemed to operate on a different, almost surreal plane, a world where every moment was heavy with unspoken questions and the bitter tang of betrayal. I began to notice the smallest details in everyday interactions that I had once taken for granted. The way the morning light streamed through the blinds of my apartment, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls, and the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk that no longer brought comfort but served as a reminder of how quickly life could change. The pain that I felt was not just the acute sting of being deceived by those I once trusted, but a persistent ache that seeped into every corner of my existence. I remember one rainy afternoon when I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets, the pitter-patter of rain on my jacket echoing the relentless drumbeat of my own thoughts. I passed by coffee shops and bookstores, places that used to be sanctuaries of warmth and community, and yet now each step felt like a march through a battlefield scarred by the remnants of shattered dreams. It was during these moments of solitude that I began to question everything. What did it mean to trust, to love, and to forgive? Was there ever a way to rebuild the broken pieces of a heart that had been so ruthlessly torn apart? In my quest for answers, I sought refuge in conversations with strangers, in the dusty archives of old records, and in the timeless pages of books that spoke of human suffering and redemption. I became a regular at a local bar, a dimly lit haven where the clink of glasses and murmured confidences masked the silent battles raging within me. There, amidst the haze of cigarette smoke and muted laughter, I met people from all walks of life, individuals who had faced their own demons and emerged scarred, yet resilient. One night, as I sat across from a man named Brandon, whose eyes held the weight of years spent grappling with loss, I realized that my own pain was but one thread in the vast tapestry of human experience. Brandon spoke softly about his own betrayals, about friends who had turned into foes, and about the slow, often painful process of learning to trust oneself again. His words resonated deeply within me, echoing the sentiments I had long buried beneath layers of anger and regret. Yet, even as I forged these new connections, the memories of Ryan, Jake, and Sarah loomed large in my mind. Their names became symbols, each representing a different facet of betrayal. Ryan, with his easy charm and careless smile, embodied the cruelty of broken promises. Jake, whose ambition had blinded him to the consequences of his actions, was a testament to the corrosive nature of envy. And Sarah, whose love had once been my anchor, now represented the painful collision between hope and harsh reality. I found myself caught in an endless loop of introspection, dissecting every conversation, every laugh, every touch, trying to pinpoint the moment when everything began to unravel. My journal became both a confidant and a witness to my gradual descent into despair. A detailed account of sleepless nights, agonizing reflections, and the slow, almost imperceptible shift from trust to suspicion. I vividly recall one entry, scrawled in a moment of raw vulnerability, where I admitted that the betrayal had not only stripped me of my innocence, but had also forced me to confront the darker parts of my own nature. In that moment, I realized that my pain was not solely inflicted by those who had deceived me, but was also a mirror reflecting my own fears and shortcomings. This revelation was both terrifying and liberating. It compelled me to seek professional help, a decision that led me to a therapist named Lisa, whose calm demeanor and gentle wisdom provided a beacon of hope amidst the storm. In our sessions, I began to unravel the tangled web of emotions that had taken root in my soul. Lisa encouraged me to confront the pain head-on, to understand that every wound, no matter how deep, carried the potential for healing if one was brave enough to face it. Through weeks of introspection and guided conversations, I slowly learned to acknowledge the duality of my existence. The part of me that longed for the comfort of past connections, and the part that yearned for a future built on self-reliance and authenticity. As I navigated this treacherous terrain of emotions, I found unexpected solace in creative expression. Late at night, when the city was shrouded in silence, I would sit by my desk and write, pouring my thoughts onto paper in a torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion. My words became a lifeline, a means to exorcise the demons that haunted me and to transform my pain into something that might one day offer comfort to others. I began to share snippets of my journey on various online forums and blogs, not with the intention of seeking sympathy, but as a way to connect with those who had walked a similar path. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from across the country reached out, their stories intertwining with mine to create a rich tapestry of shared grief and eventually mutual healing. I was heartened to learn that I was not alone, that the scars of betrayal, however deep, could indeed become the marks of survival and strength. Yet, even as I embraced these moments of connection and understanding, the shadow of betrayal never fully receded. There were days when a casual conversation or a familiar scent would trigger a cascade of memories, each one a reminder of what had been lost. I often found myself caught off guard by the resurgence of old feelings, anger, sadness, even a fleeting desire for retribution. But with each resurgence, I reminded myself of the hard-earned lessons I had learned from my journey. I understood that true healing was not a linear path, but rather a series of peaks and valleys, each one contributing to the mosaic of who I was becoming. The process was agonizingly slow, punctuated by moments of despair and sudden bursts of clarity. And through it all, I began to see that the betrayal I had endured was not an insurmountable end, but rather the beginning of a transformation that was reshaping every facet of my being. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece, embracing new hobbies, forging new friendships, and even exploring parts of myself I had long neglected. There were quiet mornings, spent jogging along the river, feeling the crisp air fill my lungs and the steady rhythm of my footsteps reminding me that life, despite its unpredictability, continued onward. I immersed myself in volunteer work, finding that helping others provided a sense of purpose and a way to reclaim the trust that had been so brutally stolen from me. In these acts of service, I rediscovered a connection to humanity that had been obscured by my own pain. I began to understand that forgiveness was not about condoning the actions of those who had wronged me, but about liberating myself from the chains of resentment that threatened to keep me imprisoned in the past. Slowly, the wounds began to scar over, not erasing the memories but softening their edges, transforming them from jagged reminders of loss into badges of experience and resilience. As the months turned into years, the journey of healing revealed itself to be both an internal odyssey and an outward quest to rebuild the bonds of trust that had once seemed irrevocably broken. The betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had forced me to confront the complexities of human relationships, the delicate interplay between love and ambition, loyalty and self-interest. And while the pain of that chapter in my life would never fully disappear, I learned to carry it with a sense of quiet dignity, a reminder of both my vulnerabilities and my capacity for growth. In sharing this part of my story, I hope to offer solace to those who have experienced similar betrayals, and to remind them that the path to healing, though fraught with obstacles, is a journey worth undertaking. Each day, each small step forward, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And so, I continue on this path, forever changed by the past, but determined to forge a future defined not by the betrayals of yesterday, but by the strength and wisdom gleaned from them. The road ahead remains uncertain, but with every sunrise, I embrace the promise of new beginnings, a chance to rebuild, to trust again, and to live a life that honors both the pain and the triumphs of my journey. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds of my new apartment, I found myself awakening to a world that, while still tinted by the remnants of betrayal, now held the promise of renewal. The past, with all its wounds and echoes, had not vanished. Rather, it had become an inseparable part of who I was, a silent, persistent reminder of both pain and potential. I continued to navigate life with a cautious heart, each step measured as if afraid to trigger another cascade of memories. Yet, as I ventured further along this uncertain path, I began to notice subtle signs that change was not only possible, it was inevitable. In the months following my initial descent into despair, I took tentative strides towards reclaiming a life that was no longer defined solely by betrayal. I enrolled in a local creative writing class, one that promised not just an outlet for my raw emotions, but also a community of individuals who, like me, had been touched by life's unpredictable cruelty. Among these new acquaintances was a woman named Emily, a gentle soul with eyes that reflected both sorrow and hope. Her own story of loss had etched quiet lines of resilience across her face, and as we shared our narratives in whispered confidences during class, I began to see in her the possibility of connection without pretense or guarded defenses. Our conversations were a blend of hesitant revelations and tentative laughter, each exchange a small step toward healing. Emily, too, had known the sting of betrayal, her trust once shattered by someone who had promised forever, only to vanish like smoke. In her presence, I discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness to be hidden, but rather a bridge to understanding. Together, we explored the fragile beauty of human relationships, often finding solace in the simple act of sharing a cup of coffee at sunrise, or a quiet walk through the city park, as autumn leaves painted the ground in hues of hope and renewal. Yet, even as new bonds were formed, the ghost of my past remained unyielding. There were nights when, despite the comforting presence of newfound friends and the gentle encouragement of Emily's smile, I would lie awake, haunted by the voices of Ryan, Jake, and Sarah, figures who had once played pivotal roles in my life, now relegated to bittersweet memories. In these moments, the ache of betrayal would surge anew, overwhelming the tentative calm I had so painstakingly built. I found myself questioning the very essence of trust. How could I ever fully embrace the future when the shadows of the past loomed so large? Was it possible to build new foundations when the old ones had crumbled beyond repair? These questions drove me deeper into self-reflection. I spent countless hours poring over the journal entries that had once recorded my darkest moments, seeking patterns or insights that might help me understand not only the betrayal itself, but also the intrinsic nature of my own responses. With the guidance of Lisa, my therapist, I began to discern that the path to healing was not a linear progression from hurt to happiness, but rather a cyclical journey of confrontation, acceptance, and ultimately, transformation. Each time the memories threatened to drown me, I learned to rise again, bolstered by the support of those who had proven their loyalty in the crucible of hardship. One crisp evening, as winter's chill wrapped the city in an almost tangible embrace, I found myself at a community art exhibit dedicated to themes of loss and redemption. The gallery was filled with expressions of raw emotion, paintings that captured the tumultuous interplay of light and shadow, sculptures that seemed to speak of both devastation and rebirth. In that creative sanctuary, I encountered others who had weathered storms similar to mine, each artistic piece a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I spent hours wandering the space, absorbing the collective narrative of struggle and renewal, feeling that the creative expressions around me echoed the silent symphony of my own journey. That night, inspired by the courage of the artists and the stories etched into each canvas, I resolved to confront the memories that had long held me captive. I reached out to Emily, and together we embarked on a project that sought to capture the intricate tapestry of betrayal, loss, and healing through words and art. We decided to create a multimedia blog, a digital refuge where others could find solace, share their own experiences, and ultimately discover that even in the aftermath of profound betrayal, beauty and hope could emerge. As we spent countless nights brainstorming ideas and sifting through our emotions, the project took on a life of its own. It became a living chronicle of our journeys, a fusion of creative expression and therapeutic release, and a tribute to every person who had ever felt abandoned by those they loved. Working on the blog brought unexpected clarity. Each carefully chosen word and every meticulously crafted image forced me to confront the raw, unvarnished truth of my experiences. I came to understand that while betrayal had irrevocably altered my course, it did not have to dictate my destiny. With every post and every shared comment from readers who found echoes of their own stories in my words, I felt the heavy burden of mistrust gradually lifting. The community that grew around our blog was diverse, a mosaic of voices from every corner of the country, each narrative reinforcing the message that even in our darkest hours, we are capable of finding light. In the midst of this creative resurgence, a surprising opportunity arose, an invitation to speak at a national conference on mental health and resilience. The idea of addressing a crowd, bearing my soul before a sea of strangers, was both terrifying and exhilarating. Yet deep down, I knew that my story was not meant to be confined to the silent corners of my journal or the solitary glow of a computer screen. It was meant to be shared, to inspire, and to remind others that the scars of betrayal could be transformed into symbols of strength. With Emily's encouragement and the unwavering support of my new community, I accepted the invitation. In preparation for the conference, I spent endless hours refining my narrative, striving to balance the raw emotion of my past with the tempered hope of my future. The day of the conference arrived with a crisp clarity that belied the turbulent emotions churning within me. Standing before an audience that spanned a spectrum of ages and backgrounds, I began to speak, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a testament to the indomitable resilience of the human spirit. I recounted the painful chapters of my past, the moments of despair and isolation, and the slow, painful journey toward healing. I spoke of the betrayals that had shattered my trust, but I also celebrated the relationships and creative endeavors that had slowly pieced my life back together. In that moment, as I looked into the eyes of people who had gathered to listen, I felt a profound connection that transcended the wounds of yesterday. The applause that followed was not just a tribute to my words, but a collective affirmation that in sharing our vulnerabilities, we find the strength to rebuild. Now, as I continue to navigate the unpredictable currents of life, I remain acutely aware of the delicate balance between trust and caution. The past will always be a part of me, a series of lessons etched in time, but it no longer casts a dark shadow over my every step. I have learned that betrayal, for all its cruelty, can serve as a catalyst for profound personal growth. The journey is ongoing, and while the road is often steep and fraught with lingering doubts, it is also illuminated by moments of unexpected beauty and connection. In sharing this part of my story, I hope to extend a hand to anyone who has ever felt isolated by their own pain. Let this narrative be a reminder that while betrayal may leave scars, it also opens the door to new beginnings, a chance to rebuild, to redefine, and ultimately to rediscover the strength within. Each new day is a testament to our capacity for resilience, a promise that even the deepest wounds can give rise to a future filled with hope and possibility. I woke one crisp autumn morning with a newfound resolve pulsing through my veins, a resolve to finally close the chapter that had defined so much of my recent past. The memories of betrayal, though still present like faint echoes in the corridors of my mind, had gradually softened into lessons that spurred me toward a future built on hard-won wisdom and fragile hope. Standing by the window of my modest apartment overlooking the awakening city, I took a deep breath and allowed myself to reflect on the long and arduous journey that had led me here. For so long, the ghosts of Ryan, Jake, and Sarah had haunted my every thought. Their names had become emblematic of promises broken and trust shattered, each one a painful reminder of the illusions I once held dear. But as I reviewed the pages of my journals and the countless hours spent in introspection, I began to understand that the betrayal was not solely about the actions of those who had wronged me. It was about my own evolution, my gradual emergence from the cocoon of naive optimism into the realm of reality. In that fragile space between innocence and experience, I discovered the true meaning of resilience. It wasn't an easy path. The days following the ultimate confrontation had been long and dark, filled with endless nights of self-doubt and anger. I had often found myself wandering the city streets, a solitary figure immersed in the chill of disappointment, seeking answers in the silence of empty sidewalks and deserted parks. I recalled a particularly bitter winter evening when the cold was so intense it seemed to mirror the chill that had seeped into my soul. I had sat on a worn-out bench in a forgotten corner of the city, staring into the darkness, questioning if the love I once believed in was ever real or merely a cruel mirage. Yet even in those bleak moments, there was a spark, a fragile ember that refused to be snuffed out. It was the small kindness of a stranger offering a warm smile, the gentle encouragement from my therapist Lisa, or the unexpected solace found in the shared stories of those who had similarly known betrayal. One memory in particular stayed with me, a chance encounter with an elderly man on a park bench, who, noticing the weariness in my eyes, began to speak of his own losses and the redemption that came only through facing the darkness head-on. His words, simple yet profound, had echoed in my mind. "It's in the darkest nights that the stars shine brightest." In that moment, I began to understand that the pain I was enduring was not a dead end, but a gateway to a richer, more authentic version of myself. My journey of healing was not a solitary one. Alongside Emily, whose gentle strength and empathetic nature had become a beacon in my storm-tossed life, I found solace in building new, meaningful connections. Together, we continued to nurture our multimedia blog, a space that had blossomed into a thriving community of people sharing their own journeys of heartache and recovery. The blog wasn't just a digital refuge, it was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise from the ashes of despair. Every comment, every shared story reinforced a truth I had come to accept. Even the deepest wounds could transform into the seeds of hope. The project with Emily grew in unexpected ways. We hosted live discussions and invited experts in psychology and art to speak on the transformative power of vulnerability. Through these interactions, I learned that forgiveness wasn't a single act, but an ongoing process, a conscious decision to let go of the past while honoring the lessons it had taught me. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about excusing the actions of Ryan, Jake, or Sarah. It was about freeing myself from the burden of carrying their betrayals like scars that could never fade. With time, those scars became symbols of my endurance, a map of the trials I had survived and a guide for the person I aspired to become. One particularly transformative afternoon, I decided to visit the very spot where I had first met Emily. A small, cozy coffee shop nestled on a quiet street lined with sycamore trees. The place, with its soft light and muted music, had become our sanctuary, a neutral ground where vulnerability was met with understanding and compassion. As I sat in my favorite corner booth, sipping on a freshly brewed cup of coffee, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I recalled the days when the thought of trusting anyone felt like an impossible risk, when every smile and every kind word masked a potential betrayal. Now, I had learned to see beyond the surface, to appreciate the fleeting moments of genuine connection without the paralyzing fear of inevitable disappointment. During that visit, I encountered a young woman named Olivia, a regular at the coffee shop, whose quiet determination and warm laughter reminded me that life was full of possibilities. Our conversation started with small talk, about the weather, about favorite books, but soon evolved into a deeper exchange about life's unpredictable twists. Olivia shared her own story of loss and the arduous process of learning to trust again after being burned by those she loved. Her narrative, filled with the raw honesty of someone who had been deeply hurt, resonated with me. In her, I saw a mirror of my own struggles, yet also a glimpse of the strength that lay dormant within each of us, waiting to be awakened by the challenges we face. That conversation with Olivia was a turning point. It reaffirmed my belief that while the past might shape us, it did not have to define us. I began to see my journey not as a series of betrayals and disappointments, but as a mosaic of experiences, each fragment, no matter how painful, contributing to the masterpiece of my life. I embraced the idea that healing was a mosaic process. It took time, effort, and sometimes the willingness to accept that not all wounds would ever fully close. But each wound, each scar, was a testament to survival, to the strength that comes from facing our demons head-on. Inspired by these reflections, I decided to channel my experiences into a creative project, a memoir that would chronicle not just the betrayal and the pain, but also the moments of beauty and transformation that emerged in its aftermath. Late into many nights, I sat at my desk, the soft hum of the city outside providing a steady rhythm to my thoughts, as I typed out memories with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Each word felt like a step toward reclaiming my narrative, a conscious decision to transform my past into a story of growth and resilience. In the process of writing, I revisited the darkest chapters of my life, confronting emotions I had long tried to bury. I wrote about the shock of discovering that the people I had once trusted implicitly could be capable of such cold betrayal, and about the soul-crushing isolation that followed. I recounted the painful confrontation with Ryan, whose dismissive smirk had been the final nail in the coffin of our once unbreakable bond. I detailed the silent, creeping doubts that had turned every shared memory with Sarah into a painful reminder of lost intimacy. And yet, amidst the sorrow, I also captured the moments of unexpected kindness, the glimmers of hope that had begun to pierce through the darkness. As I filled pages with my heart's truth, I began to see a pattern emerge, a delicate interplay between pain and beauty. I realized that every moment of despair had been accompanied by a subtle, almost imperceptible seed of hope. It was in the quiet moments of solitude, when the weight of betrayal felt unbearable, that I had discovered my own strength. It was in the shared laughter with new friends, in the silent support of those who had also been hurt, that I had found the courage to face another day. And it was in the creative expression of my innermost feelings that I had come to understand that even the most profound pain could be transmuted into something transformative. One evening, as I sat in a local art gallery hosting an exhibition on transformation and redemption, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The gallery was bathed in soft, ambient light, and each piece of art on display told a story of struggle and eventual triumph. I wandered through the exhibits, feeling an unspoken kinship with the artists whose work had captured the essence of resilience. In that quiet space, I encountered a painting that particularly struck a chord with me, a vivid portrayal of a stormy sky giving way to the gentle glow of dawn. The painting seemed to encapsulate my journey perfectly. The chaos of betrayal, the turbulence of emotions, and finally, the serene promise of a new beginning. As I stood there, absorbing the beauty of that transformation, I knew that I had reached a point of acceptance. I had come to terms with the past, not by forgetting it, but by integrating it into the mosaic of my identity. I understood that the betrayal I had experienced was a part of my story, but it was not the entirety of who I was. I had grown, I had learned, and I had discovered that true strength often lies in embracing the full spectrum of our emotions, both the pain and the joy. In the months that followed, I continued to build upon this newfound understanding. I deepened my involvement with the community that had grown around our blog, organizing local meetups and workshops where people could share their stories and support one another. I collaborated with Emily on a series of creative projects that celebrated the power of vulnerability and the resilience of the human spirit. Together, we hosted live readings of our memoirs, art sessions that encouraged participants to express their own experiences, and intimate gatherings where healing was shared in honest, unscripted conversations. I also reconnected with old friends, not to reopen old wounds, but to seek closure and understand that people, like seasons, sometimes change. I reached out to Sarah, not with accusations, but with a sincere desire for reconciliation. Our conversation was painful and tentative, filled with the raw edges of memories long suppressed. Yet, in that honest exchange, I felt a measure of peace, a mutual acknowledgement that we had both been victims of circumstances beyond our control, and that sometimes, even the deepest betrayals could lead to unexpected lessons in forgiveness and growth. One particularly memorable day, as I sat with Emily on a park bench beneath a canopy of golden leaves, I found myself reflecting on the many twists and turns of my journey. The conversation meandered from the heaviness of past sorrows to the lightness of new possibilities. Emily's hand, warm and reassuring, rested on mine as we spoke of dreams yet unfulfilled and the quiet determination to live a life unburdened by regrets. In that moment, I realized that my story was no longer defined by betrayal alone. It was defined by the choices I made each day to embrace life, to seek beauty in the midst of hardship, and to trust in the possibility of redemption. Now, as I look back on the tumultuous years that reshaped me, I see not just the scars of betrayal, but also the blossoming of a resilience that I never knew I possessed. I stand before the future with a heart that has been tested by fire, yet remains open to the promise of tomorrow. I have learned that while the wounds of the past may never fully disappear, they can serve as reminders of our capacity to heal, to love, and to rebuild. Every memory, every scar, is a part of the tapestry of my life, a tapestry woven with threads of pain and beauty, loss and renewal. In sharing this final chapter of my journey, I hope to extend a hand to anyone who feels trapped in the cycle of betrayal and despair. Let my story be a testament to the fact that even when life seems determined to break you, there remains within each of us an indomitable spark, a spark that, with time, can kindle the flames of hope and guide us toward a future where the past no longer holds us captive. It is my sincere hope that the words I have written will serve as both a catharsis for my own soul and as a beacon for others searching for meaning in the wake of heartache. As the sun dipped below the horizon on that final day of autumn, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. The journey was far from over, but I had reached a milestone, a point where the pain of betrayal had transformed into the quiet strength of acceptance. I closed my journal, not as a final act of ending, but as a promise to continue writing the story of my life with honesty, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to growth. This is where I choose to stand now, a man who has known betrayal, who has faced the darkness, and who has emerged with scars that testify to both the suffering and the beauty of life. I no longer dwell solely on what was lost, but I cherish every lesson learned and every moment of grace that followed. The future, with all its uncertainties, beckons with the promise of new beginnings and the quiet certainty that no matter what storms may come, the human spirit has the power to endure, to love, and ultimately to heal. And so, as I send out these final words into the vast, interconnected world of our shared experiences, I invite you, each reader, each kindred spirit, to join me in embracing the promise of tomorrow. Let us honor our pasts without being defined by them, and let us move forward with the understanding that even in the wake of betrayal, there is always a chance for redemption, for rebirth, and for the discovery of a deeper, more resilient self. This is my story, a story of heartbreak, of betrayal, and of the journey to reclaim trust and self-worth. It is a story that continues to evolve with every sunrise and every whispered hope that dances on the wind. And while I may have closed one chapter today, the narrative of my life remains an open book, inviting me to write new pages filled with courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of a life well lived. Thank you for walking this path with me, for sharing in the sorrow and the triumph, and for believing that even in the most shattered moments, there lies a promise of light. May our shared experiences remind us that no matter how deep the wounds, healing is always possible, and the future, bright, uncertain, and filled with infinite potential, awaits with open arms.